Welcome to the Echoes of Time channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on rare historical photos and the compelling stories that are waiting for you to explore. The Italian explorer Attilio Gatti, with two local men and the body of a giant gorilla hung up as a trophy during a hunting expedition in the Belgian Congo. The killing of gorillas, considered an achievement at that time, took place before the awareness of wildlife conservation emerged in the second half of the 20th century. Two human hands soaked in a preserving solution, swollen and severely deformed, a direct visual proof of the destructive effects of late-stage gout. Gout was once called the disease of the nobility because of diets rich in protein and alcohol, the common causes of uric acid buildup in the blood. A portrait of Cynthia Albritton and the sculpted casts of genitalia she created to make into statues. These works were regarded as a rebellious statement, expressing the boldness of an art movement. The photograph shows Commander Richard E. Byrd, American explorer and naval aviator, in the special outfit used for his pioneering flight across the Arctic in 1926. The helmet helped the pilot stay warm and protected him from frost in the harsh flying conditions of the Arctic. The photograph shows one of the most typical examples of military camouflage, when the British Army disguised a number of military trucks by covering them with fabric made to resemble the shape of Asian elephants. The photograph, taken in 1934, shows American singer Al Johnson performing in blackface in the Play Bar of Wonders. This was a racist form of entertainment common in early 20th century America, where white performers imitated black people in a stereotypical and derogatory way. The strange smoking pipe in this 1955 photograph is a typical example of the creativity, absurd but impressive, of the golden age of tobacco. This multi-barrel pipe was the result of a mix between shock advertising, simple mechanics, and the post-war society's desire for attention. The photograph, taken in 1921, captures a special moment in the wedding of a French veteran who was blinded in the First World War. André René Roussimoff, known by the nickname André the Giant, suffered from a pituitary growth disorder that caused his height to reach 2.13 meters and his weight to be about 551 pounds. He became world famous as a professional wrestler and later became a film star with his role in the movie The Princess Bride, 1987. This photograph, taken in the 1950s, captures the moment when 8-year-old Freddie McIntosh stepped out of his house wearing a full-body sun protection suit designed to shield his skin from daylight. Freddie suffered from a rare condition that made his skin extremely sensitive to sunlight. The photograph shows a German man posing next to a person in a polar bear costume, used as a mascot for endurance and resistance against harsh weather in the early 20th century. A photograph of a unique beauty device from the 1940s. A mask made of soft rubber that fit tightly to the face and was fitted with blocks of ice. It was widely used for its effects in reducing swelling and firming the skin. The photograph, taken during Thanksgiving in 1899 in New York, shows local people in strange costumes, a custom that was once popular in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The photograph, taken in 1927, shows light therapy for infants, with the belief that sunlight or artificial ultraviolet rays could treat or prevent diseases such as rickets, jaundice, and even malaria. The photograph, taken in the 1960s, captures a common scene in the red light districts near U.S. military bases during the Vietnam War. At that time, prostitution, though unofficial, was carried out openly and tolerated within a special military-civilian ecosystem, bringing with it many health consequences. The Hungarian engineer Stefan nailed next to a strange machine he invented himself. The machine was said to have the ability to make people and objects invisible. The photograph shows a Hawaiian man in a traditional night fishing ritual, an ancient technique known as lamaku. The flame not only lit the way through the shallow waters, but also served to attract fish, especially those mesmerized by the light, swimming closer to the surface. The photograph was taken in the early 1960s, showing Marilyn together with the famous hairstylist Kenneth at a private apartment in New York. Laika was the first dog to be sent into space on the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2, launched on November 3, 1957. The flight had no plan for return, and Laika died after a few hours due to overheating. A service dog of the Red Cross wearing a gas mask, a rare device made for animals during the First World War. At that time, service dogs played an extremely important role on the battlefield, delivering messages, searching for the wounded, warning of danger, and even helping with night guard duty. The photograph captures one of the first gatherings of the Mickey Mouse Club at Ocean Park, California, around 1930. A man presenting a steel helmet, shrapnel-proof goggles, and steel gauntlets designed to protect against daggers, produced for the British Army during the First World War. This photograph is evidence of a time when technology and warfare met, when life and death were separated by only a thin layer of steel. The photograph, taken in 1945, captures an important moment related to Igor Guzenko, a Soviet cipher clerk. He wore a hood made of coarse cloth that covered his entire face, a way of concealing his identity to protect him from possible assassination attempts. The photograph shows an ancient folk custom in Ireland, men wearing straw hats that covered their faces, appearing at weddings as symbols of luck and health for the newlyweds. This tradition not only carried the meaning of concealing identity, but was also believed to drive away evil spirits and envy, protecting the new marriage from misfortune. The photograph, taken in Berlin in 1925, shows Dr. Heinz injecting a liquid extracted from live rabbits into the body of a young woman. This method was once promoted as a rejuvenation therapy, combining animal extract injections, ultraviolet radiation, and exercise. The photograph, taken in 1957 at a party in Beverly Hills, shows Italian movie star Sophia Loren sitting next to actress Jane Mansfield, with both at the height of their fame. The photograph, taken in 1934, is considered one of the earliest original selfies with a stick in the history of photography. Since the 19th century, pythons were kept as pets by some European aristocrats as symbols of uniqueness and power. Keeping exotic animals such as pythons, monitor lizards, or lizards as pets was once a trend among the nobility for many years. The photograph shows a medical examination on an American Red Cross mobile clinic train in the Volga region of Russia in the early 1920s, a time when the country was gripped by a devastating famine after the Russian Civil War. It stands as evidence of a rare period of humanitarian cooperation between the United States and the Soviet Union, reflecting the role of mobile medicine in international aid in wartime and post-war disasters. The The photograph, taken on March the 21st, 1947, shows the scene where the body of Homer Collier was found, dead from starvation and heart disease after being trapped for days without anyone noticing. His brother Langley Collier had died earlier when he was caught in a self-made booby trap he had set himself. The photograph, taken in 1922 in Carson City, Nevada, shows Zach T. Wilcox, recognized as the man with the longest beard in the world. Wilcox's beard hung down to the floor, estimated at over 2.5 meters long, grown since his youth and becoming his defining feature at local events as well as fairs across the American West. The photograph, taken in 1960 at St. Mark's Square in Venice, Italy, shows one of the most creative and daring advertising campaigns of the post-war era. Thousands of pigeons were lured to gather and form the word Coca-Cola, a spectacular visual marketing stunt staged right in the heart of a historic European landmark. The photograph, taken in the late 1940s, shows a U.S. Army Sikorsky R-5 helicopter being tested for its lifting capacity. The R-5, designed by inventor Igor Sikorsky, was one of the first military helicopters. It played an important role in rescue, transport, and reconnaissance missions. The photograph, taken in 1932 on Roosevelt Island, shows female prisoners being trained to shoot at an indoor firing range. Learning how to shoot was not only about practicing a skill, but also part of a strategy to restore dignity in the context of imprisonment. This extraordinary photograph was taken in 1918 at Camp Sherman, Chillicothe, Ohio. More than 21,000 soldiers were mobilized and arranged in a formation with meticulous detail to create a giant portrait of President Woodrow Wilson. The photograph, taken in 1925, shows a banquet held to honor the French veterans who survived the First World War. Such a banquet was meant to remember the difficult days of the war they had faced. Before Prohibition ended in 1933, the production, transportation, and sale of alcohol had become illegal across the country. Both gangsters and amateur bootleggers made fortunes through the black market liquor trade as a means of livelihood. The photograph, taken in 1950, shows a soldier feeding 2 polar bear cubs from the tower of an armored vehicle during a Soviet military expedition in the Chukchi Peninsula, a remote and icy region of the Russian Far East bordering the Arctic Ocean. The photograph shows soldiers of the British Royal Artillery sleeping on horseback, exhausted after many hours of continuous marching. The photograph, taken in 1865, shows a local street vendor selling an ancient mummy right outside the pyramids of Saqqara. At that time, mummies were often illegally excavated and sold to European tourists as strange souvenirs, before strict cultural heritage preservation laws were enacted. An image of an Egyptian man standing next to his 2 black female slaves. This is a rare piece of evidence of a dark period in 19th century Egypt, when slavery was still regarded as legal and widespread. The photograph, taken in 1924, shows a hippopotamus trained to pull a cart in a circus. Bringing hippos into circuses was not only meant to attract audiences through entertainment. The photograph captures a historic moment in 1961, when the first bricks of the Berlin Wall were being laid under the strict supervision of East German soldiers. The construction of the wall was not only a symbol of Germany's division, but also became a global symbol of the confrontation between East and West. The famous photograph, taken on the night of June 5, 1968, captures the tragic moment when Senator Robert F. Kennedy lay collapsed on the floor of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles after being assassinated. The photograph, taken in 1941, shows a psychic attempting to hypnotize a chimpanzee in a behavioral science experiment. The photograph, taken in 1939 at the Los Angeles Zoo, captures the moment when two men shot and killed an elephant named Billy after it became uncontrollable and dangerous. The photograph, taken in the early 20th century in Toronto, Canada, shows a special classroom where children were being taught how to blow their noses properly. Teaching children how to maintain personal hygiene, including a seemingly simple skill like blowing the nose correctly, was considered an essential part of improving public health. The photograph, taken in 1881, shows a local man standing next to a giant clay vessel used for winemaking by the ancient method known as kvevré. This iconic photograph, taken in 1899 at the Colorado Springs Laboratory, shows the great inventor Nikola Tesla sitting right beneath the magnifying transmitter, one of the first high-voltage devices he designed himself. The photograph captures the moment when Italian movie star Gina Lollobrigida was watching the first television broadcast of a live press conference by U.S. President John F. Kennedy at her villa in Rome in the early 1960s. The photograph, taken in 1933 in the city of Born, Belgium, shows the event when a group of children at a nearby Catholic school claimed to have seen an apparition of the Virgin Mary. The story spread quickly, attracting the attention of locals and believers, who soon gathered in a crowd beneath a viaduct to witness the event. The first space selfie in human history, taken by NASA astronaut Buzz Aldrin during the Gemini 12 mission in November 1966. The photograph captures a dramatic moment at a military fencing championship held in France, when European soldiers still maintained combat sports as part of their physical and mental training. On February 22, 1962, at the height of the Cold War, the photograph captures U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy standing with West Berlin Mayor Willy Brandt beside the Berlin Wall. The photograph captures the moment after a football match between two Spanish teams in the early 20th century. Matches played in the rain, on muddy fields were not uncommon, and players had to compete not only against their opponents, but also against the weather and the pitch itself. The strange pet-keeping culture was once a short-lived trend among American elites and artists. Wild animals such as deer, foxes, or even leopard cubs were sometimes kept as unique symbols of a different lifestyle, partly reflecting an American society searching for entertainment and individuality amid the context of global war. The photograph shows a cyclist training behind a convertible car equipped with a special windshield. This method, called motor pacing, was a popular technique in the early 20th century to help cyclists reach high speeds without being slowed by air resistance. The photograph, taken in the 19th century, shows a woman in a costume shaped like a giant egg, a form of festival disguise popular at the time. The photograph captures the baboon named Jack working at a railway signal station in Uitenhage, South Africa, in the late 19th century. The photograph, taken in the early 20th century, shows a group of children in homemade Halloween costumes. The original purpose of the festival was to ward off evil spirits and welcome winter, which is why the scary outfits were an essential part of it. This photograph, dating back to the early 20th century, shows two women doing hurdle jumps in the typical sportswear of the time, when women were just beginning to be encouraged to engage in physical exercise in public.